Hello, Ben.
Oh, Chezi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. You've moved again.
I moved yet again.
Okay. And how was that transition?
It was good. It was busy, but no major mishaps or anything. So it went pretty smoothly.
Did you learn from last move what to do this move?
In a way, it was different from my previous moves because my previous moves were from cross states.
That's true. That's true. This was less intense.
This was basically next door. So it was the first time that I used movers, which was magical.
Yeah. Just like the Israeli movers?
Just like the Israeli movers. Yeah, these ones were not Israeli.
Yeah.
Curiously, but they were very helpful.
That's awesome to hear.
Yes.
Okay, good. And aside from that, work, wife, everyone's doing well?
Everybody's good, healthy. So very fortunate.
I'm very, very glad to hear that.
How is your time in the north going?
Time
Looks like you're back.
north was good. You know, the driving back and forth is never fun, but like I didn't do it that often. But my kids had a great time. My wife had a great time. And you know, we had a lot of cousins. They had a lot of cousins over, so it was a nice way to end the vacation or the summer. My son earlier in the summer asked, like, when does the real vacation start? Because like I'm in the first part of the summer, he still had like he was going to this camp and he was doing stuff. He's like, I want to just be. I was like, don't worry, you'll have some time. You could jump in the water. You'll just be. So that was nice. Obviously, it's good that we went back to school. My kids are now in the new schools in the new neighborhood, so we're driving. My wife and I are driving back and forth, which is like a little intense.
Right.
Please God, we get our keys Sunday for the new house, which then means I start working. But I'm glad that we're that. It's phase 2 out of 4 phases, so it's good. And so
halfway
that's
there.
Well, halfway there.
Halfway there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see a new neighborhood. I'm excited to see that people in the neighborhood are talking about like different learning groups and things like that they want to start. So that also is exciting, and I hope that works out well. Okay, because we have these long gaps, I sent you again I did like a summary again of where we got to up until now in chapter 2. So I just figured we would go through that. Yeah, that chapter 2. And again, we'll see. It could be a little technical the way the AI shoots out like these things. But let's see what it says, and then we'll continue from there.
That's good.
Yeah. Do you want to also? We don't have to open it up yet. Do you want to also tee up the Rambam itself?
Yeah, that's in the pipeline after this.
Gotcha. Okay.
So mitzvot. So some of the things we talked about, mitzvot and free will. So we're trying to locate the locus of like the free will, where it's in and where it's maybe not.
Is there will within the 5 parts we were talking about of the nefesh earlier?
Right. So mitzvot and transgressions are found in the emotional mode and the motivational parts of the soul where humans have control. And then the physiological and imaginative parts like digestion and dreaming are not subject to commandments or free will as we understand it. They function automatically and aren't influenced by direct choice.
Right. We said like I could choose to eat this food. The second it's in my mouth and I start swallowing it, at that point it's automatic.
Right. So here it reiterates that free will exists in the parts of the soul that allow for moral decision making, which the digestion is not part of. And today's world often attributes behavior to external factors like birthplace, culture, genetics, raising the question of how free we really are. Interesting. Right. Um, sorry.
I feel like that's almost like an AI threat.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I mean, obviously, we can think about like when it's birthplace, I mean, like the nature nurture kind of discussion.
Exactly.
Well, but yeah. For will itself, I guess the second one. Let's see if this is this true? Is this a right? The will is not a specific part of the nefesh, but the force that unifies its parts, allowing humans to act consciously.
Well, according to the Rambam, it's like scaffolding, right? Like we were talking about, like the difference with how the Kabbalists see it as like this, it connects to all these spheres. Basically, it all connects back to the source. Here, there's a sense where it's not like a part of nefesh, more it's those things that put those things together. Mm-hmm. But which again, we said if we dig deeper, ultimately, that also means it connects back to the source. It's just sort of levels of how close they are to the source.
Right. So it says it exists between the natural nefesh, the instincts, and the divine intellect. The higher reasoning, which is also the highest part of the.
Correct. So here it's doing higher reasoning, like a sechel elyon, right? Which is like, our intellect is. I think we gave an example. It's sort of like it's like a not a mirror image, but like sort of like a drop. It's like a hint of like what it is. Connecting back to the God's divine intellect, right? So it's just like, again, like a very salty, diluted version. Yet that connects us to the divine.
Mm-hmm. Then talking a little bit about free will and intellect. In intellectual reasoning, free will applies before thought begins, allowing a person to choose what to focus on. Once engaged, logic drives a conclusion.
Right. We spoke a little also about in this conversation in general about certain axioms. We spoke about Euclidean geometry, right? Assuming that there's certain axioms that we assume that these things are true, and then we realize later that, in fact, that if you break down the math, you could see that in some cases it's not true. Nevertheless, like based on the decision to think something, then we could at that mode later on, we could just start thinking and having our free will. But we first have to sort of choose what that is.
Yeah. By the way, you're off center with the camera. I don't know if you notice. Just for our viewers and for myself as well. Philosophers may reach different conclusions using the same logic due to their chosen axioms, self-evident truths that shape their intellectual conclusions. So that's kind of great reading first. This shows that even the intellect is subject to moral responsibility based on the individual's choice of foundational beliefs.
Right, that's Rambam's whole move, right? Because of that, then I could say already at that point, right? Even there, I could. Our question was also, where could I place responsibility based on moral acts, right? Yes. And like, if you have no free will over there, then obviously I'm not going to come blaming you right now. But here too, I could see that there's a moral responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then talking about faith and heresy. Faith in God involves breaking mental frameworks built around natural beliefs, like viewing the world as an automatic system.
Right, that's what we call an apikoros, right? Like he thinks that something's like happening automatically, and this would be also the question of like again, where my axioms are coming from.
Right. Mm-hmm. And Sinai introduced a new paradigm, forcing a different understanding of the divine, leading philosophers to discover a transcendent God, even if they didn't discuss the divine providence.
Right. So basically, we spoke about how even the philosophers after the experiential period of prophecy, right? We talk about Plato and how we realize that there is this transcendent. Now, that's still very much a mute God, like we spoke. It's not Misha Mal Vaya Olam, right? Who spoke and the world became, right? So, but nevertheless, it's still a huge achievement with regards to recognizing God's name, and please God, his name will be one, right? The fact that philosophers have finally understood that there's a transcendent, that was already a very big milestone. You're mute.
Sorry. And finally, Rambam viewed Abraham's discovery of God as an intellectual achievement where questioning nature created space for revelation.
Right. So this, I think the AI is sort of mixing up the notes. We spoke about how yes, Maimonides does talk about Abraham with his intellect understanding God, but we give this example about he looked at the castle, right, and he said like there must be a creator there must be a ruler to this castle, and we said once there was that doubt of like there must be something else over here. That's when God peaks, right? God peaks him and says, and we were talking about how I must create a vacancy. I must allow for this certain doubt to doubt the nature system, which then allows me in that doubt, in that little place, I can now fill it with God.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that was filled for a long time through revelation, through the sages. Now we obviously have these words, right? And we spoke about this in earlier chapters where we were forced to use now intellectual methods to be able to start to scratch and get back to that point of understanding what revelation was about.
All right. So, I mean, the simple and very interesting point is that the question creates a space for us to explore.
Exactly. So let's open up the Rambam, which is here. Yeah, exactly. That's also where we stopped off. Kudos on you. So
Cool.
Let's read that. Can you scroll down for a second? יחקרו סיבותיו. One second. Yeah, till יחקרו סיבותיו.
Let's see. Okay. So I'll start it in Hebrew and then I'll go through the English.
Sure. No, that's not where we were. We were where you stopped above. I'm saying stop here when you're reading now.
You want to start here?
Yeah.
אומנם המעלות הם שני מינים, מעלות המידות ומעלות שכליות, וכנגדם שני מיני הפחיתיות. אומנם המעלות השכליות הם ימצאו לחלק השכלי, מעין החוכמה, והיא ידיעת הסיבות הרחוקות והקרובות, אחר ידיעת מציאות הדבר אשר יחקרו סיבותיו.
Exactly. Okay.
English?
Yeah, sure.
To help me figure out where to stop them. I'll just start. And now, as for the virtues, they are of two kinds, moral and intellectual, with the corresponding two classes of vices. The intellectual virtues belong to the rational faculty, and they are wisdom, which is the knowledge of the direct and indirect causes of things based on a previous realization of the existence of those things, the causes of which have been investigated.
Stop there. Exactly. The causes were there which have been investigated. Okay, so let's see how we do this. Kirk, you doing all right?
Yeah. I haven't been feeling particularly well physically recently, and I've been having some sleeping issues, but mentally I'm fine.
I'm glad to hear that mentally you're doing well, and physically I hope you have a speedy recovery soon. Take care of yourself.
It's just a bit hot in here, but yeah, so I decided to come on, and so this seems to be, so this is, what's the word? So there's moral and intellectual. Do you know what the Hebrew words for these are?
There is the sichliot, right? That is the intellectual. And the moral over here is sort of would be comes from the mitorer. It comes from the emotional.
Okay, so probably a better way would be emotional. Do you think that would be a better translation?
Yeah, so I would say basically what the Rambam, now that we went through, now that we saw that the choice that we have will, we have choice in the portions of the senses, right? The margish, we have it in the portion of the emotion, the mitorer, and we have it in the sichli, the intellect. But now what Rambam is going to show us right now are what can I achieve? Basically, assuming I'm making these good choices with these parts of my nefesh, what am I achieving? And these are the ma'alot he's going to be talking about, right? These are the virtues that he's
so basically, the characteristics of the soul.
Right. So there's the emotional portion, we call the moral portion, which says I work on developing good traits. And we're going to discuss more of this in chapter 4, like more in depth. And then there's the intellectual portion, which we're developing our thinking capability, which he actually doesn't He doesn't get into that. He doesn't get into that too much. But then Rambam. Sorry, you wanted to say something, Kirk?
I just want to ask, have you? So you seem pretty familiar with a lot of secular philosophy. Have you studied any phenomenology at all?
No, I didn't study it. I mean,
Like Heidegger or Sartre or Merleau-Ponty or Jaspers or any of these people?
yes. So I've read some of their works. I haven't studied it in an academic form. I'm saying, and I've been exposed to this work when I was in law school or in yeshiva or just in the day-to-day life. So like, and again, there are works of theirs that I've read.
In study groups in
Kierkegaard and other works, but again, not I didn't go. I wasn't
The reason
formally
I
educated in
the
that
reason I bring
in
this up is
philosophy.
because a lot of the phenomenologists deal with the question about how people interface between their intellectual convictions and their being in the world, or their
Of
or the
course.
structure of the consciousness and how it interfaces. Right. I haven't read. I haven't read much of the work. I've read a little bit here and there, but yeah, a lot of that is like talks about integrating the senses to behavior.
Right. So again, so we're not doing so much comparative work over here because the focus is more on Rambam. And again, while we do mention exterior sources over here, the focus is generally sort of what Rambam's line of thinking is, which is generally uh, uh, an Aristotelian viewpoint, which we're going to see exactly right now, because the Rambam gives us examples now of like 3 different examples of these intellectual virtues, right? And he writes it out. Mehen, right? We get from him. We have the. Can you scroll down? HaChochma, right? So, and this is classic Aristotle, right? HaChochma v'hi yediyat hasibot harechokot ve'akrovot acher yediyat mitziut hadavar asher yichakru sibotav, right? So, to fully understand something, you have to fully understand its cause, right? And this is the famous 4 causes that Aristotle brings, which are there's the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. I was going to say final solution, but I'm like, no, it's definitely not the final solution. So the material cause is, I'm thinking about Peugeot right now in his example of a chair. So we'll take the example of a chair, and the material cause would be like, what are the physical properties, right, that this thing is made out of? And if we're talking about a chair, it would be wood, right? Or let's say a classic chair would be wood. Chairs today could be made out of many things. Then we have like the formal cause, which is like sort of the structure and the different pieces that it's made out of, right? So a chair would be a back and 4 legs. We have the efficient cause, which is the agent involved in the process of turning this into this thing. So in the case of the chair, it would be the factory, the carpenter. Okay, that would be the efficient cause. And then there's the final cause, which is the purpose, right? Why? What is this for? And again, in the example of the chair would be to sit on. So Rambam is saying one has to obviously understand all these 4 things, right, to fully understand. And as far as also using the intellect, when we're talking about chokhmah, to try to understand what we're talking about over here. Now, together, all these things, they really give you a comprehensive explanation. Now, obviously, Rambam is he wasn't using this term, but we've used it here before. He was elevating divine sparks, right, raising sparks, and there are differences also with Chazal and the rabbis and the Greeks, right? So I would say there's a disagreement which one of these 4 is the most important. And according to the Greeks, the focus is really on the efficient cause, like the agent himself. And according to the rabbis, it's the final cause that matters, right? So as far as the Greeks are concerned, it's really the efficient cause. And God created the world, but it just is as a result of God's existence, right? And this is, again, the philosopher's God in a certain sense. As in, we understand that this is transcendent. And because of the transcendent, there is like, he is the maker of this world, but that's the focus on. The focus is on the agent. And as far as Chazal's attitude is the final cause, right? God creating this world, and he had a specific purpose in mind. And without God's like deliberate decision to create the world, there wouldn't be any world at all. And there must be like an ultimate reason for this creation. And that's why we put the focus on that. That's also the way we use the word naming, right? So as far as the Greeks, your name is the efficient cause. Your name is Ben, and that's who you are. That's the name. According to Jews, Shem is also leshema, for what? What is the purpose of this? Right. So when you have a name, generally speaking, there's the name I'm supposed to fulfill. So in theory, it would be Yecheskel would be, there's what that name means, the telos of the name, the whole history of the name, and that's a name I should ultimately throughout my life fulfill its purpose. Right now, we have shared purposes as Jews, Noahides, humans made in God's image, and then there's more specific purposes that one was created, or we call one's mission in one's life. So these are things that we have to take into consideration.
I see. And wait, Hezi, that comes from Ezekiel?
Chezi. Yecheskel is a name that both Sephardi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews call their kids. A nickname for Yecheskel in Sephardi Jews is generally Chezi. In Ashkenazi Jews, European Jews, it's generally Chizki or Chesky. I don't know what my parents were thinking, but usually I'm the only Ashkenazi Chezi I meet.
I see. And what does Ezekiel, just out of curiosity, does Ezekiel have a specific meaning or purpose?
Yes, Yecheskel means chazak, like the strength of God. El in the end is El. Generally, that means like an angel's name, but put that aside. But Yecheskel means God's strength, which is also the same meaning of Hezekiah's name, King Hezekiah, which is Chizkiyahu, which is also chazak. The Chizki is strength. Yahu is one of God's names as far as the letters of the Tetragrammaton. So there too is it's both of those names, Hezekiah and Ezekiel, are the same name.
Yeah.
Ben, let's scroll down. Umehena sechel. Yeah. 1 second. Umehena sechel. השכל היניב הוא נמצא לנו בטבע, רצינו לומר מושכלות ראשונות, וממנו השכל נקנה, ואין זה מקומו, מהן זכות התבונה, וטובה הבנה, והוא לעמוד על דבר, להבין אומרה בלא הזמן, או בזמן הקרוב, בחילות כוח הפך עלינו, או שכנגדם. Let's stop at שכנגדם.
Okay, so continuing here, ומאין השכל אשר ממנו השכל העיוני, והוא המגיע לנו בטבע, רוצה לומר המושכלות הראשונות, וממנו שכל נקנה ואין זה מקומו, ומאין זכות התבונה וטוב ההבנה, והוא לעמוד על הדבר ולהבינו מהרע בלא זמן או בזמן קרוב ובחיתיות, זה הכוח הפך אלו או שכנגדם.
Okay, let's read it in English.
So the causes which have been investigated.
Correct.
Reason, which belongs to the rational faculty, consists of the inborn theoretical reason, that is the axioms, and the acquired intellect, which we need not discuss here, and sagacity, and intellectual cleverness, which is
intellectual cleverness. Yeah, right. Okay.
Which is the ability to perceive quickly and to grasp an idea without delay or in a very short time. The vices of this faculty are the antithesis of the opposites of these virtues.
Antithesis. Okay, the opposite. Okay. So now the second one, right? The first one was chokhmah. The second one is hasechel, right? Mm-hmm. So this and the intellect, as we see over here, is broken down to two, right? There's muskalot harishonot. How do they translate it over here? The muskalot harishonot.
They translate it as, that is, axioms.
That's the axioms. Okay, fine. There's the axioms, right? So this is like the first principles, right? Would be like, I would say, an exact translation, but we could also talk about like the axioms, right? So this is before you even learned anything, right? We know like I'm alive, right? There's like that first sense. And then there's the sechel hanikna, right? The acquired intellect, right? So, or acquired knowledge. And then, so there's those two, which is the intellect. And then there's the third one, which is zchut hatvuna and tova havana, right? So zchut hatvuna would be, again, like the right reason, the clarity of reason, or here they call it the sagency or intellectual cleverness. Okay, I prefer I prefer the clarity of reason, right? And then there's tov havana, which I prefer also, you know, I don't know if I want to say goodness of understanding. What do they say it over here?
Clarity of, I mean, you said clarity.
Well, I think that zchut hatvuna would be the clarity of reason, and tov havana would be, let's say, intellectual
measure
cleverness.
of good, yeah, the goodness, how well.
Right, it's really the quality of comprehension. I would think would be a better example of that, right? Of how what's the quality of me understanding this, and that's why ultimately, if you want to understand something, you have to understand something to its core. Now, Rambam would, of course, not say this specifically, but all these three, this is what Chazal calls Chabad, Chochmah Bina Dat. Right? These things we're talking about in a different way, and in the Rambam's view, right? I'm just expressing this right now. I might not be politically correct, but this would be the difference between, let's say, in a certain sense, men and women, which when women are more intuitive, right? They have more bina, which is like it says in Masechet Megillah, bina yetera nitna lanashim, right? Or and which means they have more this intuitive knowledge. However, they're more emotional. And because they're very sensitive, they could have sort of an overload, which is when the Torah says nashim da'aten kala. It doesn't mean what people like to think, like, oh, the Torah is saying women are simple-minded. Rather, with regards to the dot and being able to handle all that information, it gets difficult to them because they're very sensitive to all these things. On the other hand, men are more intellectual with that in that sense. However, they have a difficulty with discernment, though, right? It's a little more logical. And this is why, of course, we have, as you and I and Kirk also, in Masechet Avot, we famously know im ein dat and bina ein dat, right? This is really opponent processing. You need both of these elements together, working together to create a single intellectual brain. So while we are all individuals and we have our individual job, as men or women, when we find our partner, that allows us to really phase shift to another level of intellect, because we are getting to manifest both of those elements at full capacity.
We unite our powers.
Unite our powers, and we become one. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Let's continue.
Okay.
שכנגדם, אבל מעלות המידות.
אבל מעלות המידות יימצאו לחלק המתעורר לבדו, והחלק המרגיש בזה העניין אינו רק שמש לחלק המתעורר, ומעלות זה החלק רבות מאוד, כזהירות, כלומר ירחת והנדיבות והיושר והענווה והשפלות וההסתפקות, והוא שקראו חכמים השירות באמרם איזהו השיר השמח בחלקו, והגבורה והאמונה וזולתם. ובחיתיות זה החלק הוא לחסר בו או להוסיף בהם.
That's perfect. Let's stop there. I just want to mention, because they mentioned Avot over here again, and what I mentioned earlier about Avot, I mean, even though the Rambam doesn't mention that, but of and Dat and Bina, again, as we have to remember, this is really Rambam giving us, the way he's going to interpret Masechet Avot is through this, right? So while we've done, and I'm sure we mentioned the Rambam a few times when we were going over Masechet Avot, you could see then when we read these little lines of the sages, we realize again how deep, what in one line you could have a whole, chapter of the Rambam is really hiding in this one little line. Right. So it's just, and here too, he mentions himself, Ezu Ashir Sameach Bechalko, right? There's many different levels to read that, but here Rambam fills that with a very deep meaning.
Right.
Let's read it in English.
Mm-hmm. Moral virtues belong only to the appetitive faculty, to which that of sensation in this connection is merely subservient. The virtues of this faculty are very numerous, being moderation, i.e. fear of sin, liberality, honesty, meekness, humility, contentness, which the rabbis call wealth when they say, who is truly wealthy? He who is contented with his lot. Courage could mean faithfulness and other virtues akin to these. the vices of this faculty consist of a deficiency or an exaggeration of these qualities.
Oh, let's see, Ben, exaggeration. Okay, that was good. I wonder who translates these. I mean, I'm sure it says who translates them, but like it's always
This one is Joseph Gerfinkel.
Joseph, Rabbi Joseph Gerfinkel, please. Okay, so we're talking about what do they call it here? Moral virtues or good virtues?
Moral.
Okay, well, good or moral. Right. So this is really referring, like we said, to the moral virtues, right? And Rambam gives he lists them out over here, right? Yirat chet, v'nidivut, v'yosher, v'anava, v'shvilut, v'istapkut. So and we see a lot of this also in the ethics of our fathers. And again, these are part of the emotional, right? The part hamitorer, right? This is part of the emotional portion.
Yeah.
And a man with good virtues is according to the Rambam is like a well integrated / balanced man ultimately, and he uses the 5 senses to guide him properly through these things, right? So I'm going to use my ears to listen to good things, and my eyes, my nose to do all these things, because we said again the senses sort of don't have their own will, right? I'm using them to push these other things. And now later on in classic Rambam form, we always call derech hazahav, right? Shvil zahav, middle of the road. We'll focus on that in the 4th chapter. However, when it comes to the intellect, Rambam always says we should strive for more, right? Don't be in the middle. Just go to the top. So we have to ask also why is this, right? Just in general, when knowing the Rambam and speaking about the Rambam, here he's telling us we should obviously pursue it. So there's the classic understanding, obviously, which is we say in prayer all the time, Hashem Elohechem Emet, right? God's name is truth ultimately. And that's why if you focus on intellect, ultimately you're focusing on the truth, and the truth is only God, right? So you got to constantly be learning more. And it's an infinite amount of truth with that regard. We have to realize that if virtues are part of life, and they manifest according to the Rambam in the middle, there's a balance of its sort in theory. So this also would raise a question with regards to evil, right? Because with regards to evil, generally speaking, I would say our knee-jerk reaction is if we see evil is to run completely to the other side.
Right.
I don't want to be in the middle. I want to get to the other extreme of whatever that is. However, we know that even if I run away from evil, right? I could close my eyes. That doesn't make what Hamas is doing right now disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That doesn't necessarily balance it out. And this is why the Rambam, and we've mentioned this before, he really sees evil as a partial or limited view of the good, right? And this is why when he refers to evil in the guide, specifically in the Moreh, the guide to the perplexed, it's like a lack of reality. So evil really isn't a separate force. Rather, it's an incomplete, or the term we're using right now is unbalanced form of good. And it only becomes evil when it lacks the balance of what actually makes it good, right? So in this sense, anytime we see something bad, there's a sense where in it, and this goes back to the divine sparks, we need to counterbalance it somehow and realize that there too, there's potentiality of good, whether we're taking out that from you can use a lot of examples of someone being violent, but using that sort of energy towards doing something very, very good, of course.
So lack of balance could be construed as evil, a lack of balance of attributes.
Yeah, well, it's an unbalanced form of good would be considered evil, correct?
So, and if we say that, if I'm balanced in my attributes, I could be doing that. I could be doing that, let's say, intentionally, or I can do that not intentionally, and I might cause the same result. Does that matter if I do it intentionally or unintentionally?
First of all, of course, your intentions matter, right? I'm saying that we have a whole system that's built on that, right? Mazid, Shogeg, Omer Mutar. Omer Mutar is someone thinking I did it because it's allowed, right? So there's many levels as far as now the Jewish law, how we actually deal with these things on the ground, right? You're not taking it from the intellectual realm and bringing it down on the ground, right? If now my balanced life or unbalanced life, the result of it, right? So there's a question of that, or unless you meant the question differently.
No, I didn't, but I'm just thinking through this, and I already have And one thing that I learned from reading the Rambam and going through different things is that actually it seemed like there was less in Jewish thought in halacha. There is less. The final result is much more important. Over. There's more weight on that than the intentions. It's like if something happened, whether you were intentional or not, it could matter to an extent, but it would matter less in halacha than it would matter maybe in a Western law system. So it seemed like the Rambam and halacha and the final halacha would weigh the result way more than maybe what we're used to in our modern time.
Yes, however, you also have sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila, right? Which is ultimately your end result. You must be first thinking about, ezu chacham har'eh tanolad, right? One who discerned and could read the map properly. So all of what we're reading right now in the ethics of our fathers is there to give you all the tools you need to make sure that, those decisions are being made well. So the end result could be ideal. Now,
right. So I guess my question is, I understand that balance is important, but is the Rambam advocating here? Is he trying to say that the final result is ultimately maybe more important than we think? Obviously, intention matters, but there is an emphasis on the final result, whether, right? Like if you're on balance, whether you're intentional about it or not, you might cause evil.
Yes, correct. If you're unbalanced, you might cause evil. And I mean, we get into that in the third chapter also, which is like people like, he literally discusses that. Someone thinking that he's doing the right thing, even though he's doing the wrong thing, right? That's part of what our mind plays tricks on us and does that to us, both from a psychological level and sometimes, like from an addict, it would obviously be from a physiological level as well, that he's now forced to do these things that he actually thinks are good or he needs. But I would say there's something you said that triggered something, but now I'm losing it. I'm trying to grasp it. 1 second. Balanced life. Okay. Yes. That ultimately Rambam believes, right, that if you're going to a certain extreme, right, if you are the person that is, we spoke about this, hafoch beitcha vad lachachamim, right? And make your house so. But if you kick out your family just because there'll be more room for people, right? That's an extreme. And Rambam's going to be like, that's obviously not the balance I'm looking for. So he's always pushing the concept of finding the balance is actually taking quote unquote what we think is evil or what we think is good and finding a sort of balance of that, which is like, I obviously have my family and there's a selfish part of me, but that's a healthy selfish part of me, right? I'm obviously taking care of me and my family first. And then of course I want to make sure my house is a place where Torah could be learned and all these things are true, but there's still a certain hierarchy there. And that's the balance that needs to be saved. Now, again, with regards to the intellect, he pushes an extreme for the reasons we just said. But when he talks about evil, again, like the example I said was when something bad is happening, for example, you could say, there is people are being mocked right now. A guy's being mocked right now in the street. So what's being unbalanced right now is we like the fact that people are talking to people and humor could be good, but now it's being used in an unbalanced way. So is this evil that I need to run to the other side and escape? Or is this evil that I just need to realize what it's missing is proper intentionality and proper orientation. And then it now suddenly turns into something good while still using the same components.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of a slightly different point than what I was thinking about. But
I'm sorry, dude.
No, it's okay. I was thinking about. It's just I have other context from other things that I've read that I was bringing to this. One of them is just this. I think this is from the Talmud about the story about the baby, the guy fishing on Shabbat and saving the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Is that from the Talmud?
Yes.
Right. So there's something about intentionality. Like the guy went fishing on Shabbat. He's not supposed to do it. And yet he saved the baby, picking him up from the water. Right. So there's some discussion that I remember that is one example of like intentionality and how a person gets rewarded versus punished.
Right. So I would say, so there it would be a more of a Nachum ish Gamzu, right? Gamzu letova, which is like that, here it's less of the balance. It's more that ultimately, even bad things ultimately will result in the good. But there you have a little more of like divine providence sprinkled on top of that. Rambam's focus is more of like, less about dealing with a volcano and more dealing with like the day-to-day things you're dealing with. And when we think about bad things happening or evil things happening. Okay, let's scroll down. Okay, let's see. Aval.
אבל החלק הזן והמדמה לא נאמר בו מעלה ולא פחיתות, אך יאמר שהוא זן על יושר או על בלתי יושר, כמו שיאמר שפלוני עיקולו טוב או בטל עיקולו או נפסד דמיונו, או הוא מדמה על יושר, ואין בזה כולו לא מעלה ולא פחיתות, וזהו מה שרצינו זכרו בזה הפרק.
I don't know, do people write like that today? And I wonder how that concludes in English. So you'll get there. So let's read that now in English. Are you looking for it in English?
As regards, As regards the faculties of nutrition and imagination, it cannot be said that they have vices or virtues, but that the nutritive functions work properly or improperly. As, for instance, when one says that a man's digestion is good or bad, or that one's imagination is confused or clear, this does not mean, however, that they have virtues or vices. So much we wish to discuss in this chapter.
In English, it sounds like we wanted to discuss so much, but we didn't. But like it's more like this, and this is what I wanted to discuss.
Here. Right, in Hebrew.
Right. Yeah. And that's all there is to say about this topic, Rambam. Okay. So here, right, I would not call it the imaginal I would use, but like we spoke about this earlier. As far as nutrition, I like the physiological. Right. So these are ultimately, like he says over here, these are two parts that actually don't have any choice. Either they work well, which Rambam calls like tov al yosher, or not, right? They're batel and nifsad, the way he's calling it over here. And it's a little depressing, but according to the Rambam, you might find someone with like a developed imagination. Well, there's someone that has like, is like a lacking in imagination. And according to the Rambam, you can't really develop this, right? And that's why there's no reason to praise or condone it because or come out against it because you have no control over it ultimately. And you could only use the other parts of your nefesh to nourish these two parts, basically. They assist them because here you don't really you can't really make a decision when it comes to this. Now, whether or not you could develop your imagination, she also Sherry's over here, so I'm sure she has much to say about developing your.
Well, you want it to work properly. So I mean, the spectrum there obviously is also could be pretty big. And
but according to the Rambam, in theory, if one does all the right things and he fully develops his intellect and he does all the stuff he needs to do, if he lacks imaginal skills, he still won't be able to prophesy.
Right. That's a natural capacity.
Yeah. Correct. So that's like, it's sad because like, it means like, not everyone has the gift, so to speak. Right. It's, not everyone opens up their third eye as we spoke. And now the question is that something that you could develop or not? Right. Bilam, the prophet, the evil prophet is known as Shtum Ha'ain, the one with the closed eyes. But in a certain sense, it's according to some, it's referencing the third closed eye, which is the eye that's closed, right? We don't see that. And where we put our tefillin, our phylacteries also between our eyes. So the question is if you could develop it or not. I lean more on that it can be developed and that doesn't leave us struggling. But maybe that's because I'm eager to prophesize. Do we want to continue with number 3? Or you want to stop here?
I have 10 minutes.
Well, first of all, let's just look at number 3 for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is it a long one or a short one? I think it's short, and I think 4 is long. Well, I thought it was short, but
yeah.
Okay. All right. It's all good. You want to start it? We could start it.
We can tease it.
So let's start. Let's start.
I did put 3 in the title, so
Okay. So let's start it.
okay.
Amru hakadmonim. So 1 second. Amru hakadmonim. Okay, you start reading. I'll tell you where to stop.
Okay. אמרו הקדמונים, יש לנפש בריאות וחולי, כמו שיש לגוף בריאות וחולי. ובריאות הנפש הוא שתהיה תכונתה ותכונת חלקי התכונות שתעשה בהן תמיד הטובות והפעולות הנאות, וחוליה הוא שתהיה תכונתה ותכונת חלקי התכונות שתעשה בהן תמיד הרעות והפעולות המגונות. אמנם בריאות הגוף וחלב מלאכת הרפואות תחקור עליו וכמו...
Stop there.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
תחקור עליו. Okay, concerning the diseases of the soul, the ancients.
I'm sure it's Aristotle. What is it right over there? The ancients?
It says forward, maybe it means...
okay, whatever. That's
good. The ancients maintained that the soul, like the body, is subject to good health and illness. The soul's healthful state is due to its condition and that of its faculties, by which constantly does what is right and performs what is proper, while the illness of the soul is occasioned by its condition and that of its faculties, which results in constantly doing wrong and performing actions that are improper. The science of medicine investigates the health of the body. Is that it? No?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically we're talking about an unhealthy or an unhealthy nefesh over here, according to what the Rambam's talking about. And when we say an unhealthy nefesh, we don't mean someone with like a chemical imbalance in his brain or someone with a mental disorder. We're talking someone with bad traits, right? If earlier we're talking about someone with good traits, here we're talking about some bad traits, but we're using, especially in Hebrew, right? Briut hanefesh is usually talked about like the way we use it today is more about mental health.
Right.
And the way the Rambam really describes it over here, really, the words he uses, shetiyeh tchunata v'tchunat chalakeh, tchunot shetaseh behen tamid hatavot v'apulot haneotot. Right? So meaning if one is naturally inclined to do good, then he's basically considered healthy, or vice versa, right? If someone that is not doing good, that means that he's not balanced, right? That means that there's an issue over there. He's acting badly. Let's continue reading. וכמו
שחולי הגוף ידמו להפסד הרגשתם במה שהוא מתוק שהוא מר, ומה שהוא מר שהוא מתוק, ויציירו הנאות בצורת בלתי נאות, ותחזק תאוותם ותרבה הנאתם בעניינים אין הנאה בהם כלל לבריאים, ואפשר שיהיה בהם צער כאכילת האפר והפחם והדברים העפוצים מאוד והחמוצים מאוד, וכיוצא באלו מן המזונות אשר לא יתאוו להם הבריאים, אבל ימאסו אותם. כן, חולי הנפשות, רוצה לומר הרעים ובעלי המידות הרעות, ידמו במה שהוא רע, שהוא טוב, ובמה שהוא טוב, שהוא רע, והרשע יתאווה לעולם הפלגות, אשר הן באמת רעות, וידמה בעבור חלי נפשו שהם טובות.
Let's stop there. So first of all, you see what you were mentioning in the last chapter, at least I think what you were alluding to, which is like, what if this is like someone clearly having the wrong balance, right? But the intentionality is not there. He thinks he's doing the right thing. Someone that thinks good is right is wrong is right. It sounds like Luke Thompson, that like he's always constantly saying that what's wrong is right. How does he say what's wrong is right and what's right is wrong? I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if the Rambam agrees with him, or at least the Rambam thinks that he's unbalanced. Okay, so you want to read that in English?
Yep. Now, just as those who are physically ill imagine that on account of their vitiated states. What does this mean? Their impairing tastes. the sweets is bitter and the bitter is sweet. And likewise, fancy the wholesome to be unwholesome. And just as their desire grows stronger and their enjoyment increases for such things as dust, coal, very acidic and sour foods and the like, which the healthy loathe and refuse, as they are not only not beneficial even to the healthy, but possibly harmful. So those whose souls are ill, that is the wicked, talking about the wicked and the morally perverted, they imagine that the bad is good and then the good is bad. The wicked man, moreover, continually longs for excesses which are really pernicious, but which, on account of the illness of his soul, he considers to be good.
Exactly, a confused person, right? So the Rambam is basically telling us over here, right? He has this comparison that he keeps on doing, right? And he's adding a symptom over here, which is like both mental and spiritual with this person. And like, there's many examples and you're welcome to add examples, but let's say what comes to mind is, let's say, alcohol and cigarettes, right? So someone could abuse his body thinking that this is what his body needs, right? He ends up hurting himself. Today, we know that people again, someone could be in a place where he knows it's bad for him, yet he still continues to do so, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately. And sometimes I could be in a state, again, where I'm convinced I'm doing the right thing. And I'm not talking about where it's like a mental state, right? And this is why this is also sometimes a very big issue with someone's ego. Someone could have a very inflated ego, or let's say we'll see this many times with, I don't want to say teen stars, but let's say A-listers, right? Where like they live in a certain bubble where no one's telling them no, and their reality turns skewed, and their whole way of looking at the world is skewed. So their intention is not wrong, but they think like, oh, this is normal to talk to people this way. And
that's right. It's a lack of feedback.
Correct.
I mean, you can get it from a closed circle. You can get it if your sources are wrong. I mean, you can believe that something is good because it's advertised that way, but it actually is harmful to you. So, yeah.
Hello, RJ.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so I would say, and I need to go, Ben. So we'll end on these next. Well, really, this leads to the big question. I guess we'll deal with this next week. Is what is the source of the value hierarchy, right? Ultimately, and maybe this is also McMosif to help with this. This is where Kierkegaard comes in with either or, right? Is it the desires or the aesthetics? Like what decides a morality? But we'll get into that next week. But here I would say, just to stress another example, or at least how the rabbi saw this example, which is the example of incest, Gilui Arayot, right? Which is, or if anyone here saw Game of Thrones, they know. Have you seen Game of Thrones, Ben?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so Cersei and Jaime, right? So that love over there, which they think is the most amazing love, ultimately causes all this drama around, right? Bran gets pushed off the window. He can't become king. The father would everyone knows that it's wrong, yet they're so stuck thinking it's right. And that's an example of we know Jaime's a good guy, but why can't you understand that this is a crazy relationship that you have over here, right? And according to the Rambam, at least, incest is one of the hardest human things to control. Rav Kook also agrees with this. His reason is because it's so hard because it's rooted in the life force from where you came, right? As in it's within the family. So if you think about it, there's almost something beautiful about the fact that Cersei and Jaime love each other because you can't be any closer. On the other hand, that's what's skewed over there, right? That's what they're not seeing. And or you could look at atomic energy, right? Obviously we have this idea of we're all scared of Chernobyl or Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Yet we know that it's an amazing way of getting energy, and very, very green, relatively speaking. And we have to decide again how we use this balance. And it's the same thing that could be, yes, giving the example of incest, which is it's a very powerful thing, but it could be used completely wrong. And really, in the end, if you're flipping your values, it's not the source of the problem. Really, that's the result of the problem, right? It's not the problem that Cersei and Jaime ultimately had children. Rather, it's one really needs an external way to measure his own moral judgment so he could see his errors. right? And if there's no way if I can't be outside that box, which is part of what we're going to discuss, maybe we'll even go to the example of Icarus. But ultimately, I have to remove myself from myself to be able to look at these moral things and understand. And if I don't have that, right, I could be lost in a Jamie Cersei sort of situation.
If I could just add something quickly
Please.
from another